The Breaking Point captain, Elena Vasquez, adjusted her diplomatic uniform one final time as she stepped onto the polished floors of Nexus Station. The massive space station hung suspended between 3 star systems, serving as neutral ground for the galaxy's most important negotiations. Today would mark the end of a decade-long conflict that had claimed millions of lives across 12 worlds. She carried no weapons. Her only protection was the white diplomatic sash across her chest and the faith that civilized beings could still choose words over warfare. Elena had spent 3 years working toward this moment, traveling between hostile worlds, building bridges where others saw only burned ground. The conference hall stretched before her like a cathedral of hope. Representatives from 4 different species filled the tiered seating, their various forms creating a living tapestry of galactic diversity. At the center sat the Corvani delegation, their reptilian features sharp under the station's artificial lighting. Emperor Zethak himself had come, his scales gleaming with ceremonial paint that signified his commitment to peace. Elena took her place at the human delegation table, nodding to her assistant, Marcus Torres, who had served alongside her through countless negotiations. The young man's eyes held the same hope she felt burning in her chest. After today, children across the galaxy would grow up knowing peace instead of war. The opening ceremonies passed in a blur of ancient rituals and formal speeches. Each species presented their terms, their compromises, their promises for a better future. Elena watched it all with growing satisfaction. This was what humanity did best. They brought different voices together and found harmony in the chaos. When her turn came to speak, Elena stood slowly, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. The hall fell silent. Thousands of eyes focused on the small human woman who had somehow convinced bitter enemies to sit at the same table. 3 years ago, I came to this galaxy as a stranger, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I found worlds torn apart by ancient hatred, species that couldn't even speak each other's names without spitting in disgust. But I also found something else. I found beings who were tired of burying their children. She gestured to the mixed assembly before her. Today, we choose to be better than our past. Today, we choose to build something worthy of the stars themselves. The applause was thunderous, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the station. Elena felt tears, threatening at the corners of her eyes. This was why she had become a peacekeeper. This moment when hope triumphed over hate. Emperor Zethak rose from his ornate chair, his towering frame commanding attention. His translator converted his hissing words into perfect galactic standard. The Corvani Empire accepts these terms. We sealed this pact with our sacred oath. May the stars witness our commitment to peace. The signing ceremony was a thing of beauty. Each representative placed their mark on the treaty, their signatures glowing with bioluminescent ink that would preserve the document for millennia. Elena added her own signature with a steady hand, feeling the satisfaction of a job well done. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Nexus Station had ever seen. Beings who had been enemies for generations shared food, told stories, and laughed together. Elena moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and watching former enemies become friends. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not superior weapons or advanced technology, but the ability to see potential where others saw only problems. She was speaking with a group of young Corvani scholars when the first shot rang out. The sound cut through the celebration like a blade through silk. Elena spun toward the source, her diplomatic training kicking in as she sought to identify the threat. A group of Corvani soldiers had entered the hall, their weapons raised and their ceremonial paint replaced with war markings. "Treachery," someone screamed. "The humans have betrayed us." But Alina could see the truth in the soldiers' eyes. This wasn't about betrayal. This was about power, about those who profited from endless war and couldn't accept the reality of peace. The leader of the soldiers, a scarred veteran with cybernetic implants, pointed his weapon directly at Alina. His voice boomed across the suddenly silent hall. "The human peacekeeper dies today. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who would make us weak." Alina stood perfectly still, her hands visible and empty. Around her, security forces were moving, but she knew they wouldn't reach her in time. She had always known this moment might come. Every peacekeeper understood the risk. "You don't have to do this," she said calmly, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "The treaty is signed. The war is over. Your people can finally know peace." The soldier's laugh was like breaking glass. "Peace is for the weak. The Corvani are warriors. We do not bow to human softness." The shot came without warning. Alina felt the plasma bolt tear through her chest. The searing pain followed immediately by a strange numbness. She fell to her knees, looking down at the spreading stain on her white diplomatic sash. The hall erupted in chaos around her, but she barely heard it. Marcus was suddenly beside her, his hands pressing against her wound, his voice desperate. "Alina, stay with me. Medical team, we need medical." She reached up with a trembling hand, touching his face gently. "Tell Earth," she whispered, each word a struggle. "Tell them I died believing in peace. Tell them not to let this destroy what we built." The cameras had been rolling throughout the celebration, broadcasting the historic moment to billions of viewers across the galaxy. They captured every second of Elena's murder, every detail of her final moments. The images would be seared into the collective memory of every human alive. As Elena's eyes closed for the last time, she couldn't know that her death would change everything. She couldn't know that her final words would become a battle cry that would echo across the stars. On Earth, the reaction was swift and terrifying. The peaceful planet that had sent diplomats to solve galactic conflicts suddenly revealed capabilities that had been hidden for decades. Military installations that had been disguised as research stations came online. Fleets that had been catalogued as exploration vessels shed their civilian markings and revealed their true nature. Project Prometheus had been Earth's deepest secret, a contingency plan created by military minds who understood that sometimes peace could only be maintained through the threat of overwhelming force. For years, it had remained dormant, a sleeping giant waiting for the moment when humanity's peaceful nature would be tested beyond its limits. That moment had arrived. Admiral Marcus Chen stood in the command center of the newly revealed Earth Defense Headquarters, watching the footage of Elena's assassination for the 100th time. The woman on the screen had been his sister, and her death had awakened something in him that he had hoped never to face. "Admiral," his aide reported, "all fleets are reporting ready status. We have 700 ships standing by for deployment." Chen nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Authorization code Prometheus 7 Alpha. All units are cleared for immediate deployment to Corvani space. Rules of engagement are weapons free. We're not going there to talk." The aide hesitated. "Sir, the Galactic Council has requested that we allow them to handle this through diplomatic channels." Chen finally turned away from the screen, his face a mask of cold determination. Captain Vasquez tried diplomatic channels. The galaxy saw what happened to her. Now they'll see what happens when humans stop being diplomatic. The mobilization was like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. Earth's hidden fleets emerged from concealment like ghosts becoming solid. Massive dreadnoughts that had been disguised as asteroid mining platforms revealed their true purpose. Carrier groups that had been listed as scientific expeditions dropped their false identities and showed their weapon arrays. The Corvani had thought they were dealing with a peaceful species that relied on others for protection. They were about to learn that humanity's peaceful nature was a choice, not a weakness. As the first wave of Earth's fleet entered hyperspace, heading for Corvani territory, Admiral Chen stood alone in his command center, staring at a photo of his sister. She had died believing in peace. Now it was his job to ensure that her sacrifice meant something. The galaxy was about to learn that there was nothing more dangerous than a human who had lost faith in diplomacy. Asterisk. The Reckoning, the Corvani homeworld of Kethva, had never seen anything like the fleet that emerged from hyperspace above their capital city. 700 ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapons that no one had known existed. The planet's defense grid, considered one of the most advanced in the galaxy, suddenly seemed pitifully inadequate. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Prometheus, watching the enemy fleet scramble to respond. The Corvani had expected retaliation, but nothing on this scale. Their arrogance had blinded them to the reality of what they had awakened. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, "We're receiving multiple surrender requests from civilian vessels. Corvani Defense Command is demanding we withdraw immediately." Chen's expression didn't change. Ignore the Defense Command. Accept the civilian surrenders and escort them to safe distance. We're not here to slaughter innocents. The first engagement came when a squadron of Corvani fighters attempted to intercept the human fleet. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration. Earth ships moved with precision that seemed almost supernatural, their weapons finding targets with impossible accuracy. The Corvani fighters were disabled rather than destroyed, their crews captured rather than killed. It was a message as clear as starlight. Humanity had the power to annihilate, but chose to show restraint. The same restraint that Captain Alina Vasquez had shown right up until the moment they killed her. Target their military installations, Chen ordered. Weapons platforms, command centers, fleet yards. Leave everything else untouched. The bombardment that followed was surgical in its precision. Orbital defense platforms simply ceased to exist, their atoms scattered to the solar wind. The great shipyards that had built the Corvani war machine were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Command bunkers that had stood for centuries were vaporized in seconds. Through it all, the civilian population centers remained untouched. Even the government buildings were left intact, their occupants watching in terror as the human fleet demonstrated the difference between warfare and genocide. Emperor Zethek himself appeared on the communication channels, his scales pale with shock. "What do you want?" he demanded. "We will negotiate. We will pay reparations. Please, cease this attack." Chun's response was broadcast across the entire Corvani Empire. "You had your chance to negotiate. Captain Alina Vasquez came to you in peace, and you murdered her on live broadcast. Now you face the consequences." The second wave of the human fleet was even more terrifying than the first. These were the specialists, the hunters, the ones who had been trained for exactly this scenario. They moved through Corvani space like ghosts, appearing at military installations across a dozen worlds, dismantling the Empire's war machine with methodical efficiency. But it was the third wave that truly broke the Corvani spirit. These ships carried something far more dangerous than weapons. They carried the truth. Every communication channel in Corvani space was suddenly filled with footage of Elena's assassination. But this wasn't just the raw feed from Nexus Station. This was the complete intelligence package that Earth had compiled. The planning meetings, where the assassination had been discussed, the command structure that had ordered it, the names and faces of every conspirator. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The assassination hadn't been the act of rogue soldiers. It had been planned at the highest levels of Corvani command, a deliberate attempt to destroy the peace process and restart the profitable war. The revelations split the Corvani Empire. Military commanders who had been kept in the dark about the conspiracy turned against their superiors. Civilian populations who had celebrated the peace treaty rose up against those who had stolen it from them. The Empire began to tear itself apart from within. Chen watched it all from his command center, feeling no satisfaction in the destruction. This wasn't victory. This was necessity. The galaxy needed to understand that there were consequences for betraying trust, for murdering peacekeepers, for choosing war over diplomacy. The breaking point came when the conspirators were finally cornered. The scarred veteran who had pulled the trigger, the generals who had planned the operation, the politicians who had authorized it, they were found hiding in a bunker beneath the Imperial Palace, surrounded by the wealth they had accumulated through decades of war profiteering. Chen transported down to the planet's surface personally, something his security team had strongly advised against. But he needed to look these beings in the eye. He needed them to understand exactly what they had done. The bunker was a monument to greed and corruption. Treasures from 100 worlds lined the walls, all of it paid for with the blood of soldiers and civilians. The conspirators cowered in the deepest chamber, their ceremonial war paint smeared with fear and desperation. "You wanted war," Chen said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the enclosed space. "You murdered a woman who came to bring you peace because you were afraid of losing your power. Well, congratulations, you've got your war." The scarred veteran who had killed Elena tried to speak, but Chen cut him off with a gesture. "You broadcast her death to the galaxy. You wanted everyone to see what happened to those who trusted you. Now everyone will see what happens to those who betray that trust." The trial was broadcast across the galaxy, every species watching as the conspirators were forced to confront the evidence of their crimes. The proceedings were scrupulously fair, with full legal representation and complete due process. This wasn't vengeance. This was justice. But it was the sentence that truly demonstrated Earth's new position in the galaxy. The conspirators weren't executed. They weren't imprisoned. They were exiled to a remote world where they would spend the rest of their lives in isolation, cut off from the civilization they had tried to destroy. Death would be too easy, Chen explained to the galactic media. They wanted to be remembered as warriors who died for their cause. Instead, they'll be remembered as cowards who destroyed everything they claimed to protect. The aftermath of the Corvani War, as historians would later call it, reshaped galactic politics forever. Earth's hidden military capabilities were now public knowledge, and with them came a new understanding of humanity's place in the cosmic order. The Galactic Council formally apologized for their failure to protect Captain Vasquez. New protocols were established for the protection of diplomatic personnel. The Corvani Empire was restructured under international supervision. its military permanently reduced, and its government reformed. But the most important change was in how other species viewed humanity. The peaceful diplomats who had seemed so vulnerable were revealed to be the representatives of a species that could end civilizations if provoked. The same hands that offered friendship could deliver annihilation. Chen stood in his quarters aboard the Prometheus, looking out at the stars that Alina had loved so much. Her death had changed everything, but not in the way she would have wanted. Peace had been preserved, but only through the demonstration of overwhelming force. A soft chime announced an incoming message. It was from Earth, from the families of the thousands of human peacekeepers still serving across the galaxy. They wanted to thank him for ensuring their safety, for making sure that no one would ever again think that killing a human diplomat was acceptable. He closed the message without responding. There was nothing to say. Alina had died believing in peace, and now her death had become the foundation for a new kind of peace. One based not on trust and goodwill, but on fear and respect. The galaxy was safer now. Diplomatic negotiations proceeded without the threat of assassination. Treaties were honored because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate. Peace reigned across the stars, but Chen knew the truth that Alina had died trying to prevent. Real peace, the kind built on mutual understanding and respect, had died with her on Nexus Station. What they had now was simply the absence of war, maintained by the promise of overwhelming retaliation. As the Prometheus turned toward home, Chen made a silent promise to his sister's memory. Humanity would never again be seen as weak. Their diplomats would never again be murdered by those who mistook kindness for vulnerability. The galaxy would know peace, even if it had to be enforced at the barrel of a gun. In the end, that was Elena's real legacy. Not the peace she had tried to build, but the peace that her death had made possible. It wasn't the peace she had dreamed of, but it was the peace the galaxy deserved. The stars shone cold and distant as the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed by the death of one woman who had believed in the power of words over weapons. Her name would be remembered for millennia, not as the peacekeeper who died for her beliefs, but as the catalyst who revealed humanity's true strength. Captain Alina Vasquez had wanted to be remembered as a builder of bridges. Instead, she became the foundation upon which a new galactic order was built. An order where peace was maintained not through trust, but through the certain knowledge that betraying that trust would bring swift and terrible consequences. The galaxy had learned what humans were capable of when they stopped being diplomatic. It was a lesson that would never be forgotten. Asterisk.